Chapter 1. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. 1. Night stand with a mysterious man. The end to my normal, poor, and simple life all started when I had a night stand with an unknown man. He was unknown to me because I was too drunk and too heartbroken to remember or care who he was. My eyelids and body felt so heavy. Is it morning already? I have to go to work today. I breathed in deeply as I still kept my eyes tightly shut. It must be morning already and I didn't want to get up. This bed feels so soft and comfortable, I could sleep in it forever. Wait. I gasped as I bolted up into a sitting position. I knew it that this is not my bed. Where am I? Squinting my eyes against the sunlight that was pouring in through a crack in the curtain and onto my face, I started to look around. My body still felt tired and heavy from sleep and perhaps all the drinks I had last night as well. Looking around, it seemed like I was in a very luxurious hotel room, and I was alone. I was sitting on a king-size bed in a large room decorated with burgundy wallpaper. The room was luxuriously decorated with a mix of burgundy and gold color tones. To my shock, I couldn't remember how I ended up here no matter how hard I tried to remember. What happened to me? How did I end up here? Where are my friends? Thinking too hard began giving me a nagging headache. What time is it now? I need to get to work. As I began getting up, I felt the sheet and blanket rub directly on my skin. Pulling up the blanket that was covering my body confirmed my worst suspicion. Yes, I was completely naked. I closed my eyes as I braced myself for the worst-case scenario. I can't believe this is happening to me. What happened last night? Did I sleep with someone? I saw my clothes strewn randomly all over the floor as if they were taken off of me in a hurry. I blinked rapidly a few times, willing my hangover to go away so that I could focus on the situation at hand. With the resolve to face the truth, I pulled the whole blanket away to expose my naked body. It aches. There. Spreading my legs a little confirmed my worst suspicion. I felt an ache that I was used to experiencing after a night of hot and heavy love-making. It was clear that last night I went all the way with a man that I didn't even know. And didn't even remember. Envy that I didn't really remember what happened last night, but my pussy seemed satisfied with the attention it had received and undoubted enjoyed. Reaching my hand down to touch the cleft in between my legs, I found myself still dripping wet from the session last night. The warm wetness of my love juices coated my fingers. I looked at the sticky wetness of my love honey and realized that I must have came quite a lot last night. Whoever I slept with did a thorough job of giving it to me. I moaned softly as I looked around again at the bed. The state of the bed left little room for imagination of what took place here last night. I sighed with relief as I spotted a few used condoms in the room. At least, I don't need to worry much about STDs or unplanned pregnancy. We must have done it so many times last night, judging from the many used condoms, although I couldn't quite recall exactly what happened. Oh no! I exclaimed as I saw the time on my mobile screen. If I don't hurry up, I will be late for work. I don't even have time to return home to change. I should quickly shower and get dressed before heading straight for work. This is such a disaster. Ah! I sighed loudly as I saw the reflection of my naked body in the mirror. Whoever I slept with last night was quite aggressive in his mating session. There were many love marks on my body such as my neck, shoulder, my chest, my tummy, and a few on my thighs and legs. Thankfully most of them wouldn't be visible if I wore my clothes. I'll conceal the hickey on my neck with some concealer and makeup in case my long hair did not cover it completely. That should do. The love marks on my body brought back hazy memories in bits and pieces of what happened last night on the bed in this hotel room. Short fragments of memories of what the unknown man did last night to me began flooding back into my mind. He supported me to this hotel room, and I remembered that I kissed him passionately before he started kissing me back. Then, he pushed me down onto the bed and continued kissing me as he began stripping me. When I was naked, he started stripping himself. Then he kissed my neck softly before licking it. This mark here was probably from when he sucked on the side of my neck. Then his hands wandered and explored my body. His hands felt warm on my skin as he caressed and kneaded my naked breasts. This mark on my chest was from when he sucked on my breasts teasingly before he started licking my nipple wildly. My fingertip stroked my nipple, and a slight stinging pain told me just how sensitive they still were from his rough sucking last night. My nipples were still swollen and a little pink from the loving yet slightly rough attention that they had received from before. These marks on my thighs were from his kisses before he started sucking on the sensitive skin of my inner thighs. I wondered if he tasted me there, and then I was sure that he probably did. The stinging sensation in between my legs that seemed to throb deeply inside of me was a sure sign that something thick, long, and massive had been inside of my love tunnel. My lower abdomen told me that his cock must have stirred up my insides quite deeply when he thrusted his thick and massive rod into my wet hole. To be continued. Chapter 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Interview invitation. I didn't know why I hated to admit it, but the man from last night was very good at sex, and it seemed like he knew what he was doing. My wrecked but fully satisfied body and pussy was more than enough proof of that. It didn't matter though, because I won't ever see that man again, and even if I did, I probably won't recognize him. He probably won't recognize me either. Oh, the joy of one-night stands with no strings attached. Although I said that inside of my head, this was the first one-night stand that I've had all my life. I cleaned up myself and showered quickly as I tried my best to make it in time for work. Recovering from a hangover is getting more challenging now. I guess I wasn't getting any younger. I took a deep breath as I closed the door firmly behind me, mentally locking up the event of last night and putting it behind me. I'm definitely not the type to have one-night stands with random guys, and in fact, this was the first time that this has happened to me. However, I knew that I couldn't undo what was done. I will probably never meet that man again, whoever he was. It was time to return back to reality. Did I make it? I mumbled underneath my breath as I panted. After getting off the cab, I literally ran as fast as I could in my high heels to the office. I placed my hands on my knees as I bent down in exhaustion. My slight hangover was giving me a headache, and it was clear that I was far from being fit. Finding the time and discipline to work out was so difficult. Looking at my phone, I was right on time. Score. Around 2 years ago. I don't know much about the business world, but this interview is supposed to be a big deal, isn't it? My mother said as she smiled proudly at me. Looking down at the letter that had just been delivered to our small apartment earlier today, her eyes widened as she continued to read the words printed on the page on repeat as if she couldn't believe her own eyes. I don't blame her. Even I couldn't believe that I had been selected to interview at such a large and well-known company. I guess it is, Mom. I replied, trying to sound as calm and composed as possible. However, on the inside, I was screaming with joy, and it was all I could do to contain myself from jumping up and down in excitement. Even if it was just the first step of getting my foot through the door of this company, I was thrilled to get a chance to interview at Jesson Hills, the leading advertising and film production company in the country. No, in the world. I peered over my mother's slim shoulder to see the letter that she was holding in her hands. Slowly, my mother turned around and handed me the letter so that I could finally see it for myself. The whole event seemed more real once I felt the invitation letter in my own hand. It was just a single piece of paper, but it felt heavy as if it was made of metal instead of just plain paper. If I can land this job, then I can unlock my life and finally become a professional full-time employee and help lift the financial burden of my family. I better go make dinner. Let's celebrate, my mother cried out excitedly as she headed towards the small kitchen at the back of the room. I've been working hard my whole life towards this moment. I cannot let this opportunity slip by. My name is Karina, Rena for short. As you've probably figured out by now, I come from a very poor family. More accurately, my father passed away from illness when I was just a baby, leaving my mother as a single mother. My mother and I live in a small town on the outskirts of the city where she worked her whole life taking on various odd jobs around the clock just to make ends meet. I spent my entire childhood staying home alone until I could go to a public school near where we lived while my mother went out to work to put food on the table. She worked at any job that would hire her, ranging from being a waitress, a gardener, a florist, a babysitter, and then progressing upwards when she finally landed a full-time job as an assistant cook in one of the local restaurants in the small town that we lived in. I realized earlier on in life that if we were to survive, I would have to find a way to be less of a burden to my mother as much as possible, especially financially. I learned that we had to support each other, and I could contribute by being less demanding and doing my best to take care of myself. I hated being a kid, not because I couldn't wait to grow up into an amazing adult and do all the things that seemed fun that adults could do, but it was because I hated how useless and helpless I was at that time. Knock knock knock. Firm knocking sounds on our front door brought me back to the present as I instinctively got up from where I was sitting at our small dining table and headed towards the door. Not many people visited, let alone knew where we lived, so I had a pretty good guess already regarding who was at the door. "Hi, Auntie Jane. What a pleasant surprise. Want to join us for dinner?" I greeted the old and slightly frail-looking auntie standing in front of my door wearing her signature red knitted jacket. "Congratulations. I'm dropping by because I heard the awesome news from your mum." "Congratulations," Auntie Jane exclaimed excitedly before taking my hands into her thinner ones and squeezing them tight. "News travels extremely fast in this small town, doesn't it?" I bet my mother gave Auntie Jane a call the moment she disappeared into the kitchen. The speed that gossips and news travels in this small town should never be underestimated. To be continued. Chapter 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. To survive, it's a little bit too early for that. I haven't gotten the job yet. "Oh, you should come in," I replied as I smiled back at her and motioned for her to enter. Auntie Jane walked in carrying a bag as she patted my arm on her way in. I closed the door after her and gestured for her to take a seat on the sofa. Our apartment was small, so there wasn't much space to welcome guests, which was why we hardly ever invited anyone over. Auntie Jane was an exception because to my mother she was like an older sister in every way, and to me, she was like my second mother. She helped keep an eye on me when my mother was away working when I was younger, since she only lives next door. Auntie Jane lives alone and doesn't have children of her own, so it was quite natural that we quickly became like family to each other. "Dinner is ready," my mother called out from the kitchen with perfect timing. "I'll help," I called back as I hurried into the kitchen to help carry out the plates. "Is Jane here yet?" my mother asked energetically. It was clear that she was in a splendid mood. "Yes. She just got here," I replied smoothly as I helped my mother bring out the food. "Monica. Your food smells so good as always. I'm here to congratulate your dear daughter in person. I'm so proud. I'm so happy," Auntie Jane said happily as she clapped her hands together. Once we were all seated at the dining table, the three of us chatted away while we ate dinner together. It's moments like these that I think that despite all of life's hardship that I am actually quite lucky. We were poor, but we were happy enough. I have these two wonderful women who I consider family right here with me. Oh, I almost forgot. Here, I brought these shoes over so that you can wear them to your interview. You don't have formal leather shoes, right?" Auntie Jane said as she handed me the shoe box that she had extracted from the bag she was carrying earlier. "Oh wowda, thank you so much," I replied with a genuine smile. She was right. I haven't figured out what to wear to the interview, and I didn't have proper shoes for the occasion. We could have afforded something, but, as always, budget this month was sort of tight. They're not new or anything, but they're mine and still in pretty good condition. You should try them on. I think we're about the same size," Auntie Jane said. "Thank you. I'll try them on. They should fit well, no worries. You're a lifesaver as always," I said with a bright smile. Now I just need to find some appropriate work attire. Something like a simple white shirt with black skirt and a matching suit would do. Honestly, since the news of the interview came in, I had been so happy about it that the stress of it all hadn't really sunk in. However, now that some time had passed, I realized that there were many things I needed to do to prepare for the interview. I had to get the right clothing, shoes, and make up on top of preparing for the interview itself. I took in a deep breath before stuffing more of my mother's home-cooked food into my mouth. I can do this. Later that night, I lay in my bed with the lamp on as I read the content of the interview invitation letter in detail. It wasn't that late in the night, but my mother had already fallen asleep on her bed on the other side of the room. Tomorrow was another working day for her and getting up early was the norm. I tried to stay as silent as possible to not disturb her much-needed rest. I clutched the invitation letter tightly in my hands as I repeated to myself that this was really happening. The opportunity that I had worked so hard for is here right in front of me. If I can just get this job, then I can provide a better life for my mother. Hopefully a life where she could retire and stop working so hard. It clearly wasn't an easy road lined with red rose petals for me to get here up to this point. Since we were poor, I had to work extra hard at life in general. I knew we couldn't afford the school fees and other expenses related to me going to school, which meant that the only choice I had was to study my ass off so that I could secure a scholarship. I was a scholarship student all the way through school. Being a scholarship student meant that I had to maintain my grades and also work for the school as well to support the teachers. I did all of that willingly to lessen the burden on my mother, hoping that one day my efforts would bear fruit that would lead me to a promising career. I hardly had time for romance during school at all because, unlike my other friends, I had to work multiple part-time jobs to make ends meet. I would work part-time jobs after school and during the weekends. After my part-time jobs, I would study long into the night so that I could keep my grade above the scholarship requirements. I believed that if I worked hard and dedicated my effort to it, I would one day be successful in supporting my mother. I started dating a couple of guys during my high school years, but none of those relationships ever lasted long, and the same thing happened in university. I had to work many part-time jobs to make ends meet and didn't have the time to spend with my boyfriend. In the end, most of them just broke up with me or cheated on me with another girl that had more time for them. At one point, I started believing that there must be something wrong with me. I can't seem to keep a guy, and I guess my family situation didn't really help on that front. By the time I was in my final year of university, I had been dating and sleeping around with so many guys without any success in a real relationship that I finally gave up on the idea of finding the right guy for me entirely. Perhaps it was because I never had the effort or the intention to focus my utmost attention on those relationships that led to its failure. However, I couldn't help it. I needed to put my studies and my family's financial stability first, so until I landed a full-time job, my love life just had to take a back seat. I didn't realize it when I fell into a deep and dreamless sleep. When I opened my eyes again, it was already morning. Looking towards my mother's bed, I found it empty, which meant that my mother had already left for work. I stretched and yawned before slapping my cheeks with the palms of my hand. Focus, Rena. Today's the day that I go out to scourge the second-hand stores for the perfect suit, skirt and blouse for my job interview. Although the invitation letter was for an interview, the first screening of the process was a written examination. I must pass it no matter what. Regardless, proper business clothing was required because the interview was right after the written examination. I quickly showered, got dressed and headed for the nearby shopping district. It was the weekend, so the shopping streets were busy and filled with people. I quickly headed towards the second-hand clothing store that I had in mind. I knew the owner and have bought clothes from this shop before, so hopefully she could help me find what I needed and give me a little discount. Hey, Rena. How are things? Looking for anything specific today? The auntie who ran the store asked me in a cheerful voice. It was amazing how she could be so full of energy at her age. Yes, actually. I have an interview coming up, so it'd be great if I could get a suit and a skirt. A white shirt. I replied with a smile. To be continued. Chapter 4. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. The big day, wow. Congratulations. You're all grown up now, the auntie replied as she patted me on the back. You should save the congratulations for when I get the job, I said as I began looking around the store. After trying on a couple of options that the shop owner recommended, I decided on a matching set of black suit and skirt and a simple white shirt. I quickly paid and thanked the auntie before heading straight for home. The written exam was in 2 days, so between now and then, I must study for it as much as possible. The night before the test and interview, my mother and I kneeled in front of my father's photograph as we prayed for luck and success. My father died from illness when I was very young. To be honest, I didn't remember him very well. Any memories that I had of him were blurry at best, but I could sense that he must have been a good and kind man. I got to know my father based on my mother's words. She always had so many wonderful things to say about him, like how he was a very responsible man who really loved and worked hard for his family. She would praise him for always putting us first. Dad. Please keep on watching over us from above. Please do your best not to worry, Mom and I are doing well. We're both doing our best to be happy. I've always worked hard and will continue to work hard to protect my mother. Tomorrow is a big day indeed, so please wish me luck. I prayed silently as I kneeled next to my mother with closed eyes. My mother said her prayers silently as well. When we were both done, we smiled at each other. For once in quite a while, our eyes were filled with hope for the future. If I get the job, I will have to move to live in the city. That would mean leaving my mother behind in this town, but hopefully, with the money that I will earn, I can give her a better life. My mother is getting older, and it shows in her ever increasing backaches and lower stamina, although she tries her best to hide it. I wish that I could work and send her back enough money so that she could finally retire or take on fewer or less intense work. That night, after making some last-minute preparations, I went to bed early. Tomorrow, I had to catch the train super early to head into the city where I will take my first written test, and then if I pass that, I'll have the interview in the afternoon. I squeezed my eyes tight as I laid on my bed. Tomorrow will be my day. Finally I have arrived at what hopefully would be my future workplace. I stood in front of a beautifully decorated landscape with trees, bushes, flowers, and a very large water fountain. Beyond this was one of the tallest skyscrapers in the city, the headquarters of Jessen Hills. This place is the dream workplace for countless souls of my generation that have been captured by the art of advertising and film production. I bit my lip with a mix of nervousness and excitement as I looked up at the shiny skyscraper looming over me. The building was made almost entirely of shiny silver glass that reflected the light, making the building seem like a shiny diamond twinkling in the sunlight. Everyone who walked by were dressed in smart-looking suit. Everyone looked so well accomplished and qualified. Everyone looked like they belonged here. I looked around until I found a small bench where I hurriedly sat down. I was already dressed in my suit, but I haven't worn the proper shoes that Auntie had lent to me yet. Since I wasn't used to wearing shoes like these and they were a little on the small side, I had decided to change into them right before entering the building. I took off my shoes and slipped on the leather shoes. It hurts a little when I walk, but I should be able to manage for the day. I breathed in deeply as I headed for the entrance of the building. Here I come. The written interview was conducted in a very large auditorium and the tension in the air was suffocating. I knew that this job application was competitive, but I never thought that there would be this many people here. I slapped the sides of my cheeks softly to bring my brain into focus. I spent the entire morning completing the written test along with the other candidates, silently in the auditorium. Then came lunch break where we were provided with box lunches. I was too stressed and on edge that I couldn't taste the food at all as I quickly gulped it down. Next was the interview in the afternoon. Sir, with all due respect, there is no need for someone like yourself to join in the interview of new recruits. I could understand if you wanted to interview executive-level applicants, but that we're talking about fresh graduates here," an old man said with a shaky voice. "Is that all you've got to say?" Another man spoke through the phone, his voice was cold. Yes, sir," the old man replied in fear. "Good. Then noted, but my decision stands. I want to participate in some interviews for the fresh graduates," the other man spoke as he smiled on the other end of the line. "Sir, the interviews are already going to start this afternoon," the old man said hesitantly. How was he supposed to move all hundreds of interviews? It would be such a disaster. Then move it to tomorrow afternoon instead. "You can do that much, right?" the younger man said with a clear challenge in his voice. "Yes, sir," the old man was forced to reply. If he couldn't do that much, his job would be at risk for sure. You're probably wondering why I'm doing this. Well, since I'll be taking over the company soon, I want to experience firsthand how our company is viewed by the newer generation. After all, they hold the key to our successful future in their hands," the younger man said matter-of-factly. "Yes, sir, very well, sir," the old man replied in resignation. "Good. Good luck," the other man said emotionlessly before killing the line. To be continued. Chapter 5. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Stranger in a park. Attention please everyone. We are extremely sorry to inform you that the afternoon interview sessions have been cancelled. We apologize for the inconvenience and confusion that this may cause, but we have decided to postpone the interview to tomorrow afternoon instead. Please check the board or your email for the time and room for your interview tomorrow. Once again, we apologize for the inconvenience caused, a formal woman voice announced through the speakers. So there won't be interviews today. I have to come back here again tomorrow in the afternoon for my interview, which meant that I am now free for the day. I sighed as I took out my phone and began checking my email based on the announcement just now. Here it is. Tomorrow 3 p.m. room 309. The new time, date and location for my interview. Suddenly, I had the whole afternoon free and didn't know what to do. Just like the other candidates, I left the building for the day. I had plenty of time left before my train ride late in the afternoon. I guess I could change the time of my train ticket if I paid the fee, but I just didn't feel like it was worth it. I might as well find a way to burn a couple of hours now that I was already in the city, and that would help me save up on the fee. As I walked past the beautiful landscape of the garden in front of the building, I was reminded that I saw a public park right next to this building. Well, since this building was huge and so was the land that surrounded it, the park was a few minutes walk away, but I had time to kill anyways. With no better idea in mind, I started walking towards the park. By the time I got to the park, my shoes were already killing my feet, literally. I'm so stupid, I forgot to change into my own shoes instead of these ones lent to me by Auntie. I looked around the beautiful lush green park trying to locate a bench where I could sit down and rest my feet and legs. The park was beautiful beyond words, but it was also too big as well. The park was covered with lush green grass, large trees, bushes, and flowers that were in full bloom. The center of the park was a big body of water with wooden bridges built to help people cross the water. There were paths for running and cycling and benches for people to sit down and just enjoy the scenery or change their shoes in my case. I spotted a white wooden bench a little walk away which seemed to be in a perfect spot, under a large tree and quite close to the lake side. Since it was early afternoon on a weekday, there were very few people in the park. It seemed the only people free at this time of day were mothers with their babies in strollers and the elderly. I watched as a couple of them walked by, enjoying their peaceful walk and the pleasant weather. I enjoyed the sensation of the wind blowing in my hair and face as I reflected on the written exam from this morning. I guess, I didn't do too badly on it. I wasn't fully confident, but I think I did a decent job and should be able to pass it. Now all I needed to do was nail the interview tomorrow to get the job offer. There were a couple of questions that I wasn't sure of the answer to. Well, no point thinking about it now. I can't go back to change what happened in the past, so it was better to focus on the present and the future. I wonder what questions will be asked in the interview tomorrow. I was so deep in thought that I didn't realize that a man had approached me until he had already sat down right next to me on the wooden bench. "Good afternoon," the man said, drawing me out of my thoughts. I turned around, a little bewildered at how close he was sitting next to me. The man that sat next to me is probably in his early 30s with light brown hair and matching hazel eyes. The look in his eyes was nothing like I had ever seen before. His eyes were so full of determination and passion, like he had already figured out the goal of his life and was running as fast as he could towards it. I couldn't quite understand why or how to explain it, but something in those eyes captivated and held my attention. It was like, if I continued to stare into them, I would see something great happen. "You're here for an interview at Jesson Hills?" he asked. At first, I wondered how he knew, and then I realized that I still had the interviewee lanyard with the company's logo and my name around my neck. Yes, I said, nodding my head slightly as I plastered on a friendly smile on my lips. I felt a knot of nervousness in my stomach and my heart started beating faster as I became more aware of his presence close to me. I didn't need to take another look to realize that this man was amazingly attractive looking. Although he was seated, I could tell that he was very tall and had a very fit body underneath the loose and casual clothes that hung from his large and muscular frame. He was dressed in a simple white t-shirt, light blue jeans, and sneakers. There was nothing to help me indicate who this man was and what he did in his life, but for some reason, his presence intimidated me. "So, how did it go?" the man asked as a slight smile curved his beautiful lips. For a split second, I watched his full lips form a smile, completely mesmerized. "It was okay, I think. The interview in the afternoon got postponed to tomorrow. So yeah," I replied after snapping out of my own thoughts. "Oh, right, that I forgot about that," the man murmured as if to himself. "Sorry that I don't quite follow," I said softly in confusion. To be continued. Chapter 6. You are listening at novelfull.audio. "Burning kiss." "Oh, it's nothing," the man said as he flashed me a super stunning smile. I wonder if he's ever been told that he looks like a superstar actor or something along those lines. I see," I said. I didn't mind chatting to a stranger and he didn't seem to be a dangerous man or anything, but I couldn't help wondering if there was something he wanted from me. I felt quite uncomfortable around him and wanted to excuse myself. Maybe I should just head home or walk around the train station instead while I wait for my train ride. Before I could get up from the bench, the handsome man spoke up once again. "Do you honestly think that you can get a job in one of the top companies dressed like that?" the man asked as he eyed me from head to toe and then up again. "What?" I asked, frankly shocked at what I just heard. I said, "Do you honestly think you can get a job at Jesson Hills dressed in a cheap-looking and outdated suit and a worn-out pair of shoes that seems too small for you?" "Ever heard of first impressions?" the man said, putting emphasis into his every word. "I've heard of first impressions before, sure, but this guy is clearly not considering what first impressions I am having of him." I hated to admit it, but what he said could be partly true. However, he didn't have to put it that way. Thank you for pointing it out, but that was quite a rude way of saying it." I snapped at him. "Oh, sorry if my honesty offended you," the man replied like it was nothing. I couldn't tell if his apology was genuine or if he was just teasing me, and honestly, I couldn't care less. "Good day, sir," I muttered as I got off from the bench and turned to leave. "Pouting about it isn't going to improve how you look or get you any new clothes, right?" the man called from behind me. I took in a deep breath as I stopped in my tracks. I closed my eyes and bit my lower lip to stop myself from turning around and shouting my curses at that super rude guy. I'm poor, so obviously, I know best that pouting or complaining isn't going to get me the things that I couldn't afford. I sighed and instead of turning around, decided to ignore his insulting words and continue walking forward with my head held high. Being poor isn't illegal. Not having the best and most expensive clothes isn't a crime. I didn't do anything wrong and there is nothing that I should be ashamed of. Wait, I heard him say at the same time that I felt my wrist being grabbed and yanked. While stunned at how fast he had caught up to me, my body was spun around to face him once more. I looked up at him, literally, as he towered over me. What? I whispered in shock as our eyes locked. Take this, the man said, his eyes never leaving mine. I felt something being thrusted into the open palm of my hand. When I looked down, I gasped. I have never seen so much cash in my life. He had placed a thick wad of $100 bills in my hand. My eyes widened not in greed but in astonishment. What kind of man would force this much cash on a stranger that he had just met? The answer was simple, a very crazy one. No, I can't take this. I shouted at him in shock. Why not? He asked as he cocked his head slightly to the side as if what I said truly confused him. I found his behavior truly insulting and offensive. I might be poor, but that didn't mean that I wanted to benefit from his charity. Because I don't want it. I said as I stared back at him. But you need it, don't you? He replied as if what he said was the most obvious thing in the world. What? I don't need your charity. I snapped back at him. I don't get it. I'm offering you loads of money for free. You know, for free, so why aren't you happy to take it? He asked, acting genuinely confused at how I was reacting to his proposal. To me, money needs to be earned. I can't possibly take anyone's money for free without doing something in return. I said firmly. Why doesn't he get it? I don't want free money. I want money that came from my honest work and effort. Is the concept of earning money something so hard to understand? Okay, then. I guess, this would do, he said. The next thing I knew, I was in his embrace as his strong muscular arms held me, pulling me close to his body. His large manly hands cupped both my cheeks as he tilted my face up and his warm lips crushed firmly against mine. This stranger is kissing me. Why? What is going on? I made protesting sounds against his mouth while my hand started beating on his rock-hard chest. His strong arms held me tighter, crushing my body against his much larger frame. I could feel the heat of his body seep into me through our clothes. My heart began beating so fast in my chest that I thought that it would explode into tiny pieces. His lips on mine felt hotter and hotter as he continued grinding his lips against mine. He changed the angle of our kiss before I felt the tip of his hot tongue start to probe in between my lips, slowly urging me to open my lips to grant him access to the depths of my mouth. He trusted his tongue greedily into my wet mouth when my lips slowly relaxed and parted, allowing him entry. I heard a soft and low moan in my throat when I felt the heat and wetness of his tongue enter my mouth. His wandering tongue explored the cave of my mouth before entwining hungrily with my own tongue. The man grinded his tongue against mine as his lips continued to kiss and suck on mine. Our tongue engaged in a dirty dance that left my body hot and aching. To be continued. Chapter 7. You are listening at novelfull.audio. We meet again. He changed the angle of our kiss so that he could thrust his tongue deeper inside of my mouth. I couldn't stop myself from moaning at the intensity of his kiss. His hands held my head in place as he continued to seduce my lips. My body felt hot and there was an undeniable ache in my lower abdomen that longed to be fulfilled. I'll take this kiss in exchange, so feel free to take the money, he said after ending our hot kiss. But my kiss is not for sale. I protested loudly. Noel.n, I enjoyed the kiss, so you've earned the money. Good work. He said while smiling seductively at me. Wait. I called after him. I'm not taking my money back. If you don't need it, you can burn it, the man replied without looking back at me. The man never slowed down as his long strides took him further and further away from me. I was wrong. I realized that he was much taller than I initially gave him credit for. And a lot more good-looking up close. My body could still feel his body heat where his arms hugged me and where his body touched me. Strangely, my heart was beating very fast, and I found it difficult to think straight. My lips still burned from his intense kiss, and I could still taste him in my mouth. I sat down on the nearest bench in the park as I tried to catch my breath and clear my head. The event that just transpired between that stranger and I left me confused, and my brain is now a wrecking mess. I sat down and looked at the thick wad of cash in my hand. What am I supposed to do with this now? Should I go to the police with it? Will they be able to track down the man and return it? I enjoyed the kiss, so you've earned the money. The man's words rang in my ear as I replayed what he said in my head. I touched my fingers to my lips, still swollen from his aggressive kiss. Hell, I really did earn it. I wasn't sure if my kiss was worth this much money, but I probably don't need this much money for decent new clothes for my interview tomorrow. If I can just get the job, I swear I'll track him down and return the money back to him. So, yeah, it'll be like I'm borrowing it from him for now. I'm going to get the job no matter what, and if getting new clothes will help increase my odds even by just a tiniest bit, I'm going to get new clothes. There, I've decided. I still have a couple of hours before my train ride back home. That's plenty of time to pick out and buy a new outfit for tomorrow's interview. I shoved the cash into my bag and zipped it. I got up from the bench with renewed energy and determination. Thank you, stranger. Your attempt to insult me and hurt my pride, I'm going to turn all that around and use it to my benefit. In the end, I never learnt the man's identity and realized that I never asked him for his name. After a restless night tossing around in bed, the day of the interview had finally arrived. I stood in front of the same building at almost the exact same spot as I stood yesterday. However, today was different. I felt a lot more confident, and the presence of the people around me no longer intimidated me. After buying myself a new outfit and shoes for the interview, I deposited the rest of the cash into my bank account for safekeeping. I had no intention of using any more of that money that man had given me yesterday. If fate would allow us to meet again, perhaps I would thank him and return all his money back to him. I looked at the watch on my wrist that showed me that I should hurry along. My new high heels leather shoes clicking against the floor as I walked, I entered the waiting room where all other interviewees were gathered. Please remain seated and wait until your name is called. You can view your interview room and scheduled time on the monitors around the room, the facilitator announced repeatedly through the microphone. I sat down and fiddled with my phone in my hand as I waited nervously for my name to be called. I couldn't sleep much last night, so I thought quite a lot about the answers I would give during my interview. Although I wasn't completely sure what questions were going to be asked, I could guess a few. This company values inspiration and motivation. Everyone who's here for an interview obviously knows that if they've read the mission statement of the company. Based on this, I believe that some questions will be asked about my inspiration or motivation to join the company for sure. I wasn't sure if the answer that I had prepared would sway the interviewers, but it was an honest one. I don't know about the other candidates sitting in this room, but for me, I had a very personal reason why I wanted to join this company. While other candidates may want to join this company due to its prestige, high pay, or its leadership position in the industry, however, for me, I simply wanted to join this company because I believe this company saved me in one of my most desperate time of need. Miss Karina Miller. I snapped out of my thoughts when I heard my name being called through the speakers along the wall of the auditorium. Finally, it's my turn. I quickly grabbed my bag and followed the other candidates who were also leaving the auditorium. I walked along the hallway, and it wasn't hard to find the location of my interview. I stood in front of the room and checked that it was the right room number before knocking softly but firmly on the door a few times. "Come in," a voice called out to me from inside the room. Slowly, I opened the door and entered the room. The room was much larger than I had anticipated and seemed to be a meeting room of some sort with a long table. 3 people sat on the other side of the table facing me, 2 men and a woman. When I saw the face of the man sitting in the middle of the interviewer panel, my whole body froze, my eyes widened, and my mouth dropped open in shock. What is that man doing here? To be continued. Chapter 8. You are listening at novelfull.audio. His question. Is he that my interviewer? I blinked rapidly as I tried to clear away my shock. There, sitting in the middle in between the other 2 interviewer, was the stranger that I had met yesterday at the park. If he's here, then he must be one of my interviewers. What a funny coincidence. This is great, I can return the money to him. It might not be the full amount, but I must return the bulk of it that I had not spent for sure, and then for the rest, I'll pay him back as soon as possible. When I met him, he was wearing casual clothes, however, now he was wearing a formal business suit and his hair was styled differently. Although he looked different, I recognized him almost immediately. I thought he looked very handsome in his casual clothes, but he looks just as stunning or even more so in his pristine and expensive-looking gray suit. Have a seat, he said as he motioned for me to sit down. His formal tone somehow disappointed me. Did he not recognize me? Was it because I was dressed in my new suit and my hair is styled a little differently? Based on his passive attitude and lack of reaction, it was quite clear that he did not recognize me at all. After recovering from my shock, I was somehow able to force my body to walk forward. I sat down in the designated chair as I said polite greetings to my 3 interviewers. The middle-aged woman on the right was dressed in a very stylish suit and her hair was put up in a stylish bun. Her lips were a dark maroon that matched with her earrings and necklace. She eluded a sense of superiority and experience. The man on the left was slightly older than the woman and just as well dressed. He wore golden-rimmed glasses and had a compassionate look in his eyes. From the vibe that I was getting from the panelists, it was clear that this company took the screening of new recruits extremely seriously. Please start off by introducing yourself, the woman said before offering me a pleasant smile. I introduced myself and walked them through my resume. Although I was a new graduate and didn't have any real work experience, I had experience working part-time that could show that I am a responsible person who took my job seriously. My grades from university were beyond decent, even if I do say so myself. However, I was sure that every other candidate that passed the pre-screening round was the same. So if I'm not able to somehow distinguish myself here then. After introducing myself, the woman and the older man took turns asking questions related to my skills such as leadership, teamwork, and my plans for the future. The questions were standard, and I had responses prepared, so everything went smoothly as planned. I tried to answer their questions as honestly as possible with examples from my past experiences to support my point. Why have you chosen to apply to this company when there are so many others? I sat up a little straighter when the man sitting in the center of the panel asked his first question since the whole session had started. To be honest, the question wasn't unexpected, and I knew my answer without the need to prepare. The reason why I've chosen to apply to this company is because a certain commercial that this company produced helped save my life. I said passionately. Unlike the anxiety that I was feeling inside, my voice came out bright and clear. I started telling the interviewers the story behind my motivation to join this company. You know how sometimes when everything seems to be going well, you start to think that it's too good to be true. Then you start thinking that something bad is waiting to happen to you just around the corner. That was exactly how I felt on that day and, needless to say, I was right. I know this is sudden, but I guess it's better to let you know in advance. We just received news that there isn't enough budget for scholarships next year, my homeroom teacher said solemnly before sighing loudly. Oh, did I see? There won't be scholarship for students next year because there isn't enough money. I guess the budget got cut. If there's no scholarship, then how am I supposed to continue going to school? I see, was all that I managed to say. That I know this is tough, so that I'll try to see if there's something that I can do. I'll let you know if anything changes, my teacher said as she tried to smile at me encouragingly. I knew she was just trying to be kind and do her job. However, deep down I knew that there wasn't much that she could do. If there was no budget, then that was that. There was no budget. Thank you. For letting me know, I said as I tried my best to smile back at her. The conversation ended awkwardly. I waited until I left the room and closed the door behind me before letting out the sigh that I had been suppressing. I stood in the school's hallway with my back pressed against the wall as I let the words sink in. At this rate, it's going to be close to impossible for me to continue studying next year. Luckily there was still some time left. Perhaps I could get multiple part-time jobs and save up some money before the next payment was due. I grabbed my backpack from the locker and started on my walk back home with my head hung low. I didn't know how to tell my mum about this. She would be stressed and devastated, but worst of all she would start blaming herself again when none of this was her fault. Or anyone's fault. Perhaps I shouldn't even tell her about it. I found myself sighing once again as I continued to walk along the sidewalk towards home. To be continued. Chapter 9. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. My inspiration then, I felt it. A single drop of water on my forehead. I silently wished that this is all just my own imagination playing tricks on me. However, the next wave was an all-out rain pour that left everyone, including myself, scrambling for cover. This is just great. I've just been told that I've lost my scholarship for school next year, and on top of that it is now pouring like the sky is falling. I hate the rain. The feel of it on my skin, the smell of it in the air, and the sound of it. Everything about it just makes me feel sick. Just like the people around me, I found cover at the nearest subway station. It really looks like it's going to be a long while before the rain would stop. Nothing I can do but to wait it out. As I stood there and wrestled with my own worries and negative thoughts, I felt a warm wetness on my cheek. When I reached up my hand to wipe it away, I realized that I had started crying. Shit. This is the worst. While other people proceeded deeper into the station to hide from the rain, I found myself sitting down with my back leaned against the wall close to the station's entrance. The rain was beating down loudly. I pulled my knees up and hugged it close as I watched the rain fall. I couldn't even begin to describe the stressful and dark thoughts that crossed my mind as I reflected on my troublesome life while I watched the rain fall. I couldn't understand why life was so harsh. And so unfair. Sometimes, I just plainly hated my life. It was hard to go on living, so why do we even bother? At that moment, the rain that had been pouring down slowly started to stop. The dark clouds began to part, and some light started shining through. I looked up from the ground for the first time since I started curling myself up into a ball. Suddenly, there in front of me, on the large screen stretching across the whole length of the skyscraper opposite the subway station, was a scene of a sun rising. Although it was just on screen, I felt that the rising sun was so captivatingly beautiful. The rich orange, pink and red melted together as the sun slowly lit up the sky at the break of dawn. The next scene showed children running freely and then into the warm arms of their mothers. The smiles of their faces were all filled with love and hope for a better future. I watched as the many pairs of mothers and children hugged each other tightly, and I felt a warm feeling creep into my heart. The final scene showed a chubby little boy's face in a close shot. I watched as he smiled adorably before winking at me as if he had a secret to tell. I didn't quite understand why, but in that moment, I felt like he was trying to tell me that things will turn out okay. If I would just hang on. The next thing I knew, I had started crying again, but now for a completely different reason. In the end, I didn't even remember what that commercial was trying to sell to me exactly. However, I remembered every scene from the commercial so clearly. It might sound like a random and unbelievable thing, but sometimes the smallest and most random thing can have such a huge impact on you. That was exactly how I felt when I watched that commercial. I closed my eyes as I felt the warmth in my heart spreading throughout my body, giving me life. The person who made the commercial probably never knew how much his or her work had an impact on me. The producer of the commercial probably never knew how his or her work saved me that day. I want to produce commercial and films that can one day move the hearts of people and perhaps even save someone. Just like that commercial saved me on that day. This is my motivation and inspiration. I want my work to connect with people and their feelings, I said with conviction. I meant every word that I said. Over the years, I have thought about what I wanted to do with my life and my career. Whenever I thought of that, my mind always wandered towards the moment that I first saw that commercial. It was burned so clearly in my mind that I had looked it up on the internet and found out about the company that produced it. Once I had that information, it was like my mind was made up just like that. Whether it was on the spur of the moment or it was actually well thought out by the subconsciousness of my brain, I didn't know. However, I had already written down on my career survey form that I wanted to work in advertising and film production. My first and only company choice was Jesson Hills. Don't you think the commercial was a very lousy one if you couldn't even remember what it was trying to sell? The very handsome stranger in a suit asked quite bluntly after I had finished my story. That I think that there are many elements that can make a good commercial, I replied softly. That might be true. But I bet that commercial you were talking about was made by a lousy rookie producer who didn't know what he was doing. What's the point of a commercial if it doesn't lead to sales for our clients? I mean, they hired us to make commercials to increase their sales in the very first place, right? The man said before laughing a little. I knew it. This man is so rude, arrogant, and offensive. He hasn't even seen the commercial that I was talking about, and yet he's making so many negative s. Not only that, but he's also insulting the producer of the commercial. How can the commercial be so bad? I mean, it was produced by Jesson Hills. This very company that I am interviewing for. If the commercial did not meet this company's standards, then why was it released to the public? I wanted to ask him all these questions, but I just held my tongue. Well, she did tell us a very convincing story of her motivation to join the company, the woman said as she shot me a sympathetic glance. Thankfully, the topic was dropped. After exchanging a few more words, my interview officially came to an end, and I was asked to leave the room. To be continued. Chapter 10. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Returning a kiss. It was when I had left the room that I realized that I was boiling with anger. My fists were clenched to my sides, and I was biting my lower lip to control my own rage. How dare he say those rude things? I mean, I fully respect if someone has a different opinion, but that man hasn't even seen that commercial before. The commercial was quite old, from when I was still a teenager, so it was probably 6 to 7 years old now. I doubt anyone still remembers it. I was so wrapped up in my thoughts that my feet automatically took me to the building's exit. When I got there, I realized that I had completely forgotten to return the man's money. I didn't have any cash on me, but if I could just find him, then I could transfer the money back to him. Then it hit me. I can't believe that I didn't notice this before. I still didn't know his name. I still didn't know anything about him at all. His name, his age, his position in the company, that I didn't know anything. I was too shocked to find him in that room as one of my interviewers, and then I was too wrapped up in my interview that I failed to find a way to learn his name. If I remembered correctly, the other 2 interviewers had a name tag on them, and they also had a nameplate placed in front of them on the table. The nameplate on the table was clearly for candidates to know who was interviewing them. However, I don't remember the man in the middle having a name tag attached to his suit or a nameplate in front of him on the table. Great. So, how am I supposed to find him now? The only thing I knew for sure was that he worked here. That would make sense since I met him at the park near here. I walked out of the door and then turned around and walked into the building again. I couldn't make up my mind. I didn't know how to find him. Asking around would just be weird. I mean, how would I even begin to ask? Have you seen a very tall guy with brown hair and matching sexy brown eyes? Probably not going to work. On the other hand, I didn't want to give up now that he was so close. If I could just find him and return the money, then I can move on with my life without having a bunch of that stranger's cash in my bank account. I sighed loudly as I came to a reasonable solution. The other thing I knew was that I walked to the exit right after leaving the interview room. That meant that he was still in the building. So, if I waited here until he left the building, then I would probably run into him eventually. I use the word probably because unfortunately, the building has more than one exit. There was an exit joined to the parking building. It's worth a shot that I guess. I looked at the watch and figured that if he wasn't a workaholic and left work at a normal time, then I had to wait around 3 hours. I can do that. I was completely mistaken. After waiting for around 5 hours, the man never appeared. It was already dark out, and although the building was still open, there were very few people walking about now. Most people have already clocked out and left the building. I started an endless debate with myself if I should just give up and leave too. I mean, it was possible that he had left using the other exit a long time ago. However, there was a possibility that he's still in this building because he's working overtime. I've waited this long, so if I give up now, then all that wait was for nothing. Isn't that just so sad? Then again, there's that concept of sunk cost and how you shouldn't base your future decisions on it. In this case, the time I had spent waiting was sort of already my sunk cost. What should I do then? Why are you still here? My whole body froze, and my eyes widened when I heard a familiar voice very close to me. I turned around and my suspicion was immediately confirmed. There, standing right in front of me, was the man that I had waited for all this time. He really was still at work. I looked up at his face as he grinned down at me. Now that he was standing right in front of me, I didn't know what to say. My words were stuck in my throat and my mouth felt dry. "Oh," I said softly as I felt his hand plop down on top of my head. "Why are you here this late?" the man asked. I think I sensed some concern in his voice. I began saying, but his next words cut me off. "Were you perhaps waiting for me?" he asked rhetorically. Yes, I didn't know how to find you and I didn't know your name and I said without any confidence in my voice. I still found his presence very intimidating. What am I saying? I should just come out and ask for his bank account so that I can transfer back his money to him. "So, you really were waiting for me," he said with a satisfied smile. "No, it's not like that." I began protesting hesitantly. "Then what is it like?" he said without giving me a break. "I don't want to return the money that you gave me," I managed to say. Finally. "Why?" he asked bluntly. "Because," I said. "I told you it was payment for your kiss." "You did get some new clothes," he said without letting me finish my sentence. "Yeah, that I did. Thank you." I thanked him, meaning it. "Seriously though, I gave you so much money, so I was quite disappointed when you didn't turn up in some fancy branded suit, shoes, and bag," he said as he chuckled to himself. "This is good enough." "No, that's not the point. Please give me your account number so that I can return your money," I said with determination. "If that's why you're still here, then you should leave." "I'm not taking that money back, it's yours now," he said passively. "But I told you before, I can't accept that much money," I continued to argue my case. "I've told you before that you've earned it. I bought your kiss in the park, remember," he reminded me before grinning at me. "That's," I whispered. "How about this? If you want to return the money, then I'll be forced to return your kiss," he said as his eyes lit up at his own idea. "What do you mean?" I asked suspiciously. "I mean this," he said in a low and seductive whisper. Our eyes locked as his lip inched closer and closer to mine. His hand that grasped my chin was gentle, and yet I couldn't break away from him. I found myself so lost and I felt myself drowning in his captivating eyes. "He's going to kiss me. To return the kiss he bought. That's crazy," to be continued.